Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this webinar. This is a follow-up webinar from the last one, the Meet the Editors webinar, and we're so glad to have Dr. Alex Keville and Professor Sharon Kolade, who will be joining us shortly to do this follow-up discussion. Based on the successful Meet the Editors webinar, Dr. Dima Refai did suggest that we should invite Dr. Keville because the issue of the gaps in the literature was coming up in that discussion. And I remember Professor Simba was saying we should be moving beyond gaps now. That for how long are we going to keep talking about gaps and gaps and gaps?
I've heard several people and scholars saying there is a gap in the literature, there is a gap in the literature. Hear it for the first time. That's a myth. There is nothing called a gap in the literature. It limits you from emphasizing on your contribution. I'll tell you what you need to think about. When you look at the literature, think about what's the tension in the literature. Where is the divergence? Where are people diverging? What is the confusion in the literature? Focus on those areas. What is the impasse? Where are the discrepancies in the literature? Where are the limitations? That gives you the chance to build your contribution. So that's important to think about that very carefully. So yes, you've heard it for the first time, nothing called the gap.
And so that's why we're very excited to hear about this new perspective that we can adopt for our research instead of talking about gaps and gaps and gaps. So we're going to let Dr. Alex start, and then we'll have Q&A with him because he has another engagement. And then after that, Professor Sharon Kolade would take over. So go on, Dr. Alex, you can share your slides.
So yeah, thank you very much, Bridget, for the invite today. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a particular feature that we have in our journal, the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. But I'm also going to talk a little bit more broadly about what this feature of the journal might mean for us as researchers, and also similar sort of outlets in other journals as well. So this as Bridget said, it follows on from the previous webinar where Dima Refai, who is one of the co-editors of this journal, presented. The other co-editor is Laura Galloway. So that's what I'm going to focus on today, and any questions at all at the end, I'm very happy to take those. So I'm based at the University of Leeds, so Leeds University Business School, and I'm a lecturer in enterprise and entrepreneurship. I'm an associate editor for the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is an ABS 2-star journal, and that's why I'm here today. Also an editorial board member for the International Small Business Journal, and I review a range of 2-star and 3-star journals, both related to entrepreneurship and other business management fields as well. Essentially, I'm a researcher, I'm an author, associate editor, reviewer. So I've got experiences of the publication process from really, most of the angles, most of the different perspectives. And also, it's not too long since I was a PhD student and an ECR, early career researcher. So again, I well remember the challenges around publishing in those days. This slide is one that I believe Dima presented, so I won't focus on it too much, but I thought, for any of you who were not able to attend DEMA's workshop webinar, it would be worth just introducing you to the journal. So the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, it's an international journal. It was originally founded in 2000 by Jed McElwee. It was probably about 4 years or so ago that Jed handed the journal over to DEMA and Laura as co-editors. And they have embarked on building an associate editor team, of which I am one. So the journal has 4 issues a year, and there are 3 types of publication that the journal has. So the first is your typical research paper. So this could be a conceptual paper, it could be an empirical paper, it could be quantitative, qualitative. We also have teaching case studies. So these are, as it suggests, they're case studies that can be used by educators in the classroom, that also include teaching notes and questions as well. What I'm going to be speaking about mainly today is our Fresh Perspectives Research Notes feature, which we initially introduced around about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. These are very short pieces, so they're just 2,000 words. And when we first introduced Fresh Perspectives Research Notes, the reason is that we wanted to try to support, or one of the reasons was that we wanted to try to support PGRs and early career researchers to not only get experience of the publication process, but also to hopefully get a publication. In many cases, it may be the first publication, but also to give an opportunity and provide support for PhD students and early career researchers to really, hone their academic voice. So to develop innovative, creative arguments that can stimulate debate. I'll go through some of this later, but in addition to providing benefits for PhD students and early career researchers in the field of entrepreneurship, actually this is really beneficial for the wider academic community, because PhD students, early career researchers, are often doing research at what you might call the cutting edge of research. So they're typically at the forefront of current themes, current trends within the research, and also often come with innovative and creative insights and ideas. So that was the thinking behind it. I am the section editor for Fresh Perspectives Research Notes. So every Fresh Perspective Research Note that is submitted, I will be the editor for that. So I suspect that, not all of you, maybe none of you are actually, researching entrepreneurship. So some of you may be, others may not. But actually, I think the content that we're going to cover in this webinar is likely to still be of value. And there's a number of reasons, and I'm going to point those out as we go through the slides. But one reason is that when we were first developing the idea of the Fresh Perspective Research Note and what we were looking for within Fresh Perspective Research Notes, we took quite a lot of inspiration from essays. So I would say essays are the closest relation, I suppose you would say, to fresh perspective research notes. And my sense is that essays are emerging more and more as an outlet in business and management journals. So Journal of Management Studies is a really good example of this. They have the JMS Says essay series, which is very similar in lots of ways to fresh perspective research notes, in that they encourage innovative creative arguments. They want the author's voice to be at the forefront of the essay. So there are lots of similarities. So if you're not an entrepreneurship researcher, actually what we're going to talk about today, could give you some inspiration, some insights, for producing an essay for a different journal, such as the Journal of Management Studies. And I've included on the slide here a number of references. Most of them relate to the Journal of Management Studies about essays. So if you're interested in producing an essay, they are well worth looking at. And also I've included an editorial that I did with other editors and associate editors at International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is specifically about fresh perspective research notes, which you may want to look at. Another potential avenue is it's not quite as related, but for example, the British Journal of Management have their methodology corner publications, and although they are much longer than fresh perspective research notes and they're much more in-depth, actually, as we will see as we go through the slides, they do share similarities in that the articles in British Journal of Management around methodology are typically looking to capture the reality of undertaking research in the field, critique research methods, introduce new and innovative research methods. So quite a lot of the FPRNs we publish, or a reasonable number anyway, are also focused around those methodological issues. To give a bit of the context and a bit of the background, I'm sure you are aware, particularly if you are wanting to pursue a research-related academic career, publications are going to be really important. So they help you gain visibility amongst other researchers, they help you gain legitimacy with other researchers, and they also help you to make an impact, whether that's an impact to academic thinking, academic debates, or whether it's a more practical impact. Publications, research journal publications are helpful towards those. So I'm not saying research publications are the only route to those, visibility, legitimacy and impact. There are lots of other ways that those can be achieved, but publications have a role to play in that. And obviously there are lots of other benefits beyond those to publishing in academic journals and research journals. But nevertheless, these are important benefits. So when we think about visibility, legitimacy and impact, I imagine as researchers, these are typically important to us personally. I imagine most researchers want to make an impact, want to be seen as legitimate by other researchers and have credibility, and want their work to be seen. So it's important to us personally. And as I said, also, it's really important to research-related careers, academic careers. Publications are essentially a currency within that. So there's lots of value that can come from PhD students and early career researchers publishing. But I know from my own experience, I know from working with lots of PhD students and early career researchers, that publishing can be daunting. It can be challenging. I know when I completed my PhD, which is a while ago, I thought, okay, I've got my PhD now. I'm just going to go and produce papers. You know, I've done the research, I've got the findings, I've got the contributions, I can just go and publish papers. But what I found was it's not quite that easy. It is very challenging. So again, as a journal, our journal is one of its values is to support, PGRs and ECRs on the publication journey, I should say. And FPRN's Fresh Perspective Research Notes are one way that we try to do that. So the next question, I suppose, is what actually is a Fresh Perspective Research Note? So they are short pieces, so up to 2,000 words, so not very long. And as I said, they're targeted to PGRs and ECRs. So we would expect that the lead author is a PhD student or an early career researcher. When I say early career researcher, we don't particularly have a strict definition around what that is. We would probably be thinking 5 years since PhD publication, but it might be longer than that. It might be somebody who is a bit further into their career after their PhD, but maybe hasn't really published or hasn't really got on the publishing ladder. So we're a little bit flexible about what we consider an ECR to be. Although a PGR or ECR should be the lead author, it's perfectly fine for more senior researchers to be co-authors. Or we sometimes have PGRs and ECRs who co-author together. So there always needs to be that PGR ECR element, but beyond that, there are other options. And just to say that although the focus is on supporting PGRs and ECRs, actually Fresh Perspective Research Notes, when published, are open to academics, researchers at all levels. The main purpose, essentially, of a Fresh Perspective Research Note is to put forward an innovative argument. And that's the same often with essays in other journals like JMS says. Fundamentally, they want innovative arguments that people are going to read and think, okay, that's different, that's interesting. They might think, I don't agree with that. But ultimately, we want a reaction from the reader. So they might present new perspectives, new ideas, new concepts. They might take a critical angle on established theoretical or methodological themes within the field. But it's all about that innovative argument. And again, as with essays, the author's voice should be at the forefront. So it's perfectly plausible to produce a Fresh Perspective Research Note that actually doesn't have a huge number of references. So I think the first one we published, which I've got a screenshot of later, I think probably use 5 references, something like that. We do have others which are much more citation based, but even if that's the case, the author's voice should be at the forefront. Another thing is that fresh perspective research notes are not empirical. So, we don't want data, we don't want, a methodology section. So your data could be used very briefly. For example, you might use it as an example to support your arguments, but beyond that, we don't have empirical data in fresh perspective research notes. One of the benefits, one of the advantages of having this opportunity for PhD students and early career researchers is that it gives you an opportunity to experience the submission process and the review process within an academic journal. So I thought I would briefly talk you through actually what happens. So if you were to submit an FPRN, what happens next? And this process for many journals is likely to be the case. There might be slight differences, but usually you would expect this. So first of all, you would submit. The fresh perspective research note would then be read and evaluated by me as the section editor, and then I would make a decision. Do I think that this has potential, or do I not? So at that point, there is one of three avenues I will go down. I would either reject, or I would send it out for review to two anonymous reviewers, or I might almost do what you might call a reject and resubmit. So I might say, okay, I don't think this is ready to go to review yet, but I think with a bit of work in these areas, it could be sent out for review. And then it can be resubmitted, and again, I will see. So in terms of the reviewers, normally we will have one senior researcher, so it could be, for example, somebody from the journal's editorial board, and typically we will have one more junior researcher as well. And then hopefully the reviewers would like the FPRN and it would enter the revise and resubmit process until hopefully the reviewers and me are happy enough to accept it. By definition, because we are wanting fresh perspective research notes to be innovative in the arguments they put forward, it's a little bit difficult to say what kind of range they might be in terms of content, because ultimately they could go in lots of directions. But what we tend to see is that there are three broad groups in which FPRNs fall. So firstly, we have a number of FPRNs that focus on topics or theories that are used within entrepreneurship research. And there's really two ways that these tend to go. One might be to give visibility to subjects or theories that we don't really see much of in entrepreneurship research, and to put forward an argument for why we should. Another avenue we can go is to think about, okay, what theory, what topics are quite established, quite dominant within the field, and then build a critique around them. So we might find that a particular theory tends to just be accepted as an appropriate theory to use in the field. So actually it's about saying, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not quite the case. Maybe we need to give it a little bit more scrutiny. We've then got FPRNs that are based around methods. So these are the ones that kind of link a little bit to the methodology corner articles in the British Journal of Management. And typically, again, there's probably two ways they will go. Sometimes they will cover both of these. So they may critically reflect on methodologies, methods that are either new to the field, so they might promote a new method, or they might critique an established method. As part of that, they may well actually draw on the researchers' experiences and their reflections of challenges they've experienced when adopting particular methods in the field. So often when we read empirical journal articles, the methodology is presented in quite a linear way, quite an unproblematic way. It seems like everything went fine when collecting data, when analysing data. But actually, that's often not the case. It's often not quite so smooth. So this is an opportunity to actually, talk about the realities of doing research in the field. And then the other broad area is around scholarship. So this is about thinking about academia more generally. So, we might have articles that critique conventions around publishing entrepreneurship research. Or they might reflect on how these conventions either help and support or hinder entrepreneurship, PGRs and ECRs. PGRs and ECRs have a real, an important perspective to share around scholarship. Researchers who have been within academia for a long time are probably more likely to be institutionalized in a way, are more likely to accept conventions. But actually, ECRs and PGRs are probably going to have more of a fresh perspective on those. So that's another opportunity. And the FPRN that I've put the screenshot of on this slide is actually the first one we published. And this was, again, a challenge to conventions. So it was arguing that actually we always push for theoretical contributions, new insights, but actually the argument here was that if we continue to do that, it's going to make entrepreneurship insights and theory less informative. We need to test current understandings more. So what are the benefits of fresh perspective research notes? And I've already spoken about probably most of these actually, but just to go over them again. So I think for postgraduate researchers, for early career researchers, they are an opportunity for you to have a voice. So as I said, the voice of the author should be at the forefront. And in more traditional empirical articles, conceptual articles, often our voice is there, but it gets hidden a bit behind research and citations. So it's an opportunity for you to put forward an argument. It's also obviously a potential publication opportunity, and particularly if you're doing a PhD or have just done a PhD, it's a publication opportunity that is not going to use up your empirical data. So it's an additional opportunity because the likelihood is you will be wanting to publish your empirical data and the theoretical insights from that in full paper form. It's an opportunity to engage with the wider research community, and also, as I said, to get insights into the publication process. For early career researchers and PhDs, there's often a lot of workshops around the publication process, how do you respond to reviewers, things like that. But actually getting those insights firsthand, experiencing them can be a really good source of learning. So you might learn things like how to write an effective cover letter, how the review process is carried out, how do you deal with reviewers' feedback, and how can you craft an appropriate response to reviewers' feedback as well. But the benefits are much broader. They, as I said earlier, they're beneficial to the wider academic community, they're beneficial to us as a journal, because we get access to your contemporary ideas, perspectives, and insights. So often on PhD researchers, early career researchers are at the forefront of research trends, of research themes. And this provides us and the wider academic community an opportunity to get access to those, and obviously to get those fresh perspectives. I thought it would be helpful to talk about some hints and tips, so things that as an editor for Fresh Perspective Research Notes I see that might be able to help you. And again, this is also potentially going to be helpful for publishing essays in other journals. So the first one would be, don't be afraid to be innovative and maybe even provocative in your arguments. As I said earlier, FPRNs, we're looking for them to stimulate a reaction in the reader. We want them to lead to debate, we want them to lead to discussion. And sometimes putting forward arguments like that is quite scary, particularly if you're in the earlier stages of your research career. So what I would say is, try it out. Don't be afraid to do that. In some ways, it's a little bit strange in that academia, research, we're always encouraged to be different, to generate theoretical contributions, maybe to use unusual, innovative methodologies. But at the same time, in many journals, that difference, that innovation, that creativity is also restricted, is also limited, particularly as we move through the review process. And this is another value of our journal, that we do accept, and we try to accept, innovative research, even in our full papers as well. If you're not an entrepreneurship researcher, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't submit or you can't think about submitting a Fresh Perspective research note, because actually by not being embedded in the field of entrepreneurship, that's probably a really good opportunity to provide fresh perspectives from your field. Whether it's fresh methodologies, fresh theories, fresh topic ideas. And actually, as I said earlier, Fresh Perspective research notes don't need to be heavily cited. So it's not like you would suddenly need to become an expert in entrepreneurship. So there might still be opportunities there. Final few things. Keep each research note focused on one argument. You're limited in word count. Read the author guidelines and keep to the word count. And another really important thing is, if you're not sure about anything, seek advice. So if you get a review back and you're not sure how to deal with it, ask the editor. So there's always support there. You may be thinking about how do I know if I want to submit a Fresh Perspective research note or a full paper? So if you're asking that, I would say think about what you want to achieve and think about how creative you want to be. If you want to put forward a really creative, innovative argument, then a Fresh Perspective research note might be a good channel to do that. If you want to develop empirically informed theoretical contributions, in-depth conceptual contributions, then you're probably looking more at a full paper. And if you want to make methodological contributions, potentially it could fall in either camp. And as I said, think about how creative you want to be. So if you want to be really creative, think about actually may that be easier with an FPRN. It obviously depends on the journal in terms of how much creativity they accept. But I also think FPRNs provide an opportunity for us as an academic community to potentially learn from when thinking about full papers. How can we encourage and be more creative? Finally, I just wanted to say, feel free to get in touch with me. My contact details are on the journal website, or you can just search for my name at Leeds and you will find my email. So if you want any more information about Fresh Perspective research notes, feel free to get in touch. If you have any ideas for a Fresh Perspective research note and you want to run them by me, get in touch. Or if you would like to be a reviewer for Fresh Perspective research notes, if you want to get some reviewing experience and be able to put that on your CV, then let me know as well. As I mentioned earlier, typically we will have one senior reviewer and one less senior reviewer, one more junior reviewer for each Fresh Perspectives research note. Because again, we want to support early career PhD students as well. And we can do that by giving an opportunity to review and to learn about being a reviewer. So feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much for being here and for listening, and I would be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kevin. And for everyone listening, Dr. Kevin actually did say that if anyone has questions, even on publication, on any other thing regarding, you're free to ask. So I'm going to leave it open for anyone. You can unmute yourself and ask your question, or put your question in the chat box, either way. So there is one from the chat box. I would like to know, I think that's from Julius. Julius, do you want to ask your question, or you want me to read it out? Yeah, so it says, I would like to know how fresh perspective notes differ from conceptual research.
It's a good question, because obviously, FPRNs are not empirical. I suppose there's mainly two areas that they differ. The first being the level of depth. A conceptual paper is going to be longer. It's going to be much more in depth. The other key difference is that FPRNs are much less theoretically informed, and typically we're not looking for a theoretical contribution through FPRNs. We're looking for unique, fresh arguments. So they can, as I mentioned, they could present new theories, or they could critique existing theories, but it would be on a much less in-depth level, and it would be almost on a more personal level. So you wouldn't need to rely as much on drawing on research to support your critique. That can be one avenue, but you can also draw on your experiences, as I said, examples maybe that you've come across as you've been researching. So there's lots of different ways. So it's much less kind of literature based and theoretically based. Yeah.
Do you only accept fresh perspective notes from ECRs only?
They are from, so there needs to be a PGR, so a PhD researcher or early career researcher needs to be the lead author. However, they can be co-authored with more senior researchers. So, for example, we get some that are co-authored with supervisors or other colleagues, which is absolutely an option. They could be co-authored, by numerous ECRs. There does always need to be a PhD student or ECR as the lead author. Yeah.
From Barbara, would you consider empirical contributions on sustainable enterprise education as a critical approach to enterprise education?
The first thing to say, which I probably should have mentioned when I said about the topic, like the potential focus of FPRNs, the journal actually doesn't accept entrepreneurship education papers or enterprise education. I'm not actually that sure why. I think it's a historical decision. But there are lots of other journals around entrepreneurship that do accept pieces around enterprise education. In terms of whether we would think about empirical contributions, we wouldn't, for FPRNs, we wouldn't want them to be empirical. As I said, you can draw a little bit on empirical insights to support arguments, but it wouldn't really be empirical. So my main advice would be, I suppose, two things. If you wanted to submit an FPRN, think about whether you could take a different angle on the topic. So you might have enterprise education within this a bit somehow, but actually, can you speak towards another topic within entrepreneurship? So, for example, you might, I don't know, if it was enterprise education focused on social entrepreneurship, for example, could you base your study around, or your FPRN around social entrepreneurship, but actually draw on some brief examples from your study with students who are studying social entrepreneurship. So there's usually a way that you can sort of change the focus a bit. So if you're interested, you're very welcome to just have a think about that. And if you've got any ideas, feel free to drop me an email. Don't write the FPRN at that stage. Just send me a paragraph of what you're thinking. And I can let you know my thoughts. I might be able to give you some suggestions on that.
One more question. Would you consider an autoethnography paper, considering that the study context and the collected data relates to entrepreneurship?
Again, we wouldn't consider an empirical paper, so it wouldn't be empirical. So, we wouldn't be expecting insights formed around a methodology section, a finding section, etc. But definitely, if you're studying something related to entrepreneurship and you've used autoethnographic methods, you could think about, could you write a methodological FPRN, talk about the role, something to do with using autoethnography to study entrepreneurship. There is actually an FPRN that's now on the website published, which looked at the role of, I think it was ethnography and autoethnography in entrepreneurial identity research. So you might want to take a look at that. Or again, you could, build an argument around entrepreneurship and use some of your insights from your autoethnographic study to inform that without making it an empirical piece. Yeah.
Over the years, we've heard a lot of things about publishing 3-star and all that. And for ECRs, the journey to publish a 3-star is a long one. So I do have a paper under review, has been under review for 2 years now. Wow. Because it's a 3-star journal. So they come back with the first review. It takes about 6 months or 7 months, and then you send it back another 6-7 months and all that. So it's quite a long journey.
Yeah.
So what do we say to ECRs? Publish across the board, 1-star, 2-star book chapters, or just stick to quality versus quantity. What would be the advice to ECRs? Publish across the board, or just stick to quality and 3-star journals, 2-star journals only?
My advice would be, the first thing I would think about is what your ambitions are, what you want to do in terms of going forward after your PhD or such like. So, if you want to be, aiming to be a professor in Russell Group University, and do it as quickly as you can, then probably you're going to be mainly focusing on 3-star, 4-star. However, if you've got other motivations, maybe not. You might want to go more down the teaching route, for example. And if you do that, it's still really helpful to have publications along the way. So that in some way I think would guide your decision about that and the advice around that. However, even if you were wanting to, be a 4-star researcher as soon as possible, personally, I think, getting a 1-star, a 2-star is a good stepping stone. So if I think of my experience when I did my PhD, the first publication I got was a 2-star, and then that led me on to 3-star. I'm still trying for the 4-star. It's a long process. It never. I don't think it does any harm. You probably wouldn't want to use, if you want to go the 3-star, 4-star route, then you probably would save your best material, your best insights for those. But it's well worth getting a publication, in a 1-star or 2-star. Another thing to think about is, for your area of research, where are the debates happening? Because sometimes, for particular topics, actually the debates might be happening in journals that are lower ranked on the ABS list. So to be part of that community, you might need to publish there as well as trying for the higher ranked journals. Another thing is that the ABS list is helpful, but it's not perfect. So actually, some journals that are officially ranked lower on the ABS list are still really good journals. And in my opinion, often have more innovative research within there. They're more open to kind of creative research. So I would think about them. And the final thing to think about as well is, you may want to try to get a sole authored paper, at some point. Some places that's valued more than others, but that may be easier in a lower ranked journal as well. And we have a number of SPRNs that are sole authored too. So sorry, that was a long answer, but that's my thoughts.
Picking up on the last points that you made, solo authored versus collaborative work, why is one preferred over the other?
I don't know actually if it is necessarily. I think I'm still trying to figure it out myself, to be honest. So I believe it was one of my PhD supervisors said you want to get a sole authored piece fairly quickly, and the other said, when I mentioned it to her, she said, why? It doesn't matter. If you've got good publications, it doesn't matter. So I'm not sure. I think it depends on maybe the institution, depends on the individual person and their perspective. I suppose the rationale behind it is that if you can get a publication as a sole author, then it kind of shows you're not leaning on other people, and potentially I guess that's the rationale, that you're kind of evidencing that you can do a full paper on your own. But personally, I don't have a sole authored paper, and I don't think it's done me any harm, so yeah, so I'm not sure really. One final thing as well, teaching cases are also a good option. So I did a teaching case study quite early in after my PhD. It's quite a good way to get a publication, a different way. But what is, for me, has been most valuable is that you can get a publication and a teaching resource at the same time. So if you're thinking of doing a teaching case study, think about how you could use it before you do it, and that can guide the direction you take it in. So the teaching case study that I did, the main module, master's module I lead, workshop one every year is that case study. So think about how it could benefit you as an educator as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kerville. Thank you. And I hope we can invite you again to have some more insightful discussion around this. But I'll be
absolutely. Yeah, I'd be delighted to. And as I said, if any of you would like to get in touch, then feel free, just drop me an email. Very happy to do that.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, everyone. I been asked by Bridget to talk about generative AI. You know, it's a big buzz around generative AI in town. Not only among researchers, the public is it has captured public imagination. So, and everywhere you go now, there's a conversation. I have conversation with my 10-year-old every day about generative AI. You know, she's been experimenting with different things on it. So yes, it's something that as researchers we have to grapple with, whichever side of it you are on. Whether you think, oh, it's a researcher's paradise, or whether you think it's a researcher's nightmare, you know, the one thing you cannot do is ignore it, because it's there and it's not going away anytime soon. If I may just ask, really, maybe in the chat, you might type in the chat, if you have used generative AI before, what is the most significant use case that you've experienced for generative AI? I want to sort of co-create this session, if you like. What is your most significant use case of generative AI? I think that's sort of, if I can get a few inputs from you all, that would be great, as a kind of opener or icebreaker, if you like, to this session. Okay, I've seen a few. Okay, so this doing has opened the chat there with a comment about using it for brainstorming. Okay, yeah, brainstorming, course outline. Yes, all right. Okay, so that's very interesting. Do you want to say a bit about, you know, what brainstorming? Did you input something, or did you just ask it randomly to give ideas?
I think that for me, generally, sometimes you've been given a new model to teach, and sometimes you're just thinking, where do I start with the model development in terms of what do I use, and how do I make the model happen? So I've learned how to create good AI prompts, and so I would ask ChatGPT to give a very good overview of the model, the year, the context in terms of whether it's UK or US, what the model outcome is. And then what I found is that it's also great for giving activities. So when you've even have lecture content, to say suggest activities that I can use to encourage participation in my model.
All right. Okay. So let's stick with that one. So the brainstorming, you know, and so many usage, I imagine. But yeah, your new model, you are trying to check and you know, just get an initial idea. Yeah, I think that's a good one there. Of course, the challenge there then would be, you know, how would you determine what is, if ChatGPT has come up with some fancy, you know, illusory stuff that do not exist in fact, that are very high sounding. I didn't want to use the word hallucination, but yeah, correct. So how would you walk through that to see, because if it's very high sounding, one could be easily fooled. Yeah, okay, thank you for sharing that, Doing. I just want to get a sense there of what people have been using it for. Somebody said they've not used it, but they're interested. Okay, quick understanding some new literature theories. Okay, that is my mother there. Say, okay, some new literatures and theories. That is really interesting. Now, there has been a lot of comments, back and forth comment about the value of AI, the power of AI, but also the concerns around AI. Okay, yeah, thanks, Martin. Research tools, there are quite some research tools there, and I'll be sharing one in the course of this session about a custom GPT that I created last year. But what for you is the biggest concern that you have about generative AI? So that's my next question before I proceed. What is the biggest concern as a researcher now? Because I know we wear many hats. I wanted to get a sense first whether, teaching, learning, or research, what is the most significant use case that you've had. But as a researcher, specifically, what is the biggest concern you have about generative AI? Okay, so as I said, it's too generic. Right, so what do you mean, Bridget? That it, if you ask it to give you specific stuff, it might. So can you elaborate on what you mean?
Most of the times that I've used it, and I've used it across different areas, literature review, theoretical concepts, even, and all that. But what comes out does not have a lot of depth to it. So it's really, really generic. So I have to go back again and start looking for ways to make it kind of like rich, give it some depth.
Sometimes it just give you, because it's picked up stuff from thousands, literally hundreds of thousands or millions of sources, perhaps. So it can be too generic and not really fit for purpose for what you want to use it for. Okay, thank you for that. And Doi again shared about hallucination. I think that's a recurring theme about generative AI ethics, of course. Authenticity, I like that. So this was the point my daughter was making to me last week when I was asking her about her use of AI to create lyrics. She was saying she had to refine, use successive prompts, because the first output that came from the ChatGPT didn't feel authentic. In fact, she used the word, that there's a spirit, that comes with what you write, as a human. There's an embodied spirit. You're writing, embody the spirit, and that spirit sometimes is stripped off. I find it quite peculiar, actually, for a 10-year-old to express it in that ways. But I think there is something there, isn't it? That there is a soul to human writing that generative AI cannot really capture in its full essence. So there is always that. And bias of editors, by editors who do not want any who don't like AI but ask you to declare it, and then you're feeling, okay, if I declare it, what happens? Is this likely to be rejected? So I think that is an important issue. A lot of journals now make the distinction. Most journals make the distinction between using generative AI to copy edit as opposed to copywriting. And I don't want to talk at you for the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to share my screen. So let's ask ChatGPT to generate a 200-word introduction to the theory of planned behavior. A 200-word introduction to a section on the theory of planned behavior. and let's see what it comes up with. I've sort of kept it at 200 so that you can hopefully see the screen. Hopefully you don't have to strain. Okay, maybe it's gone overboard now, more than 200 words perhaps, but you can see that. So this is ChatGPT coming with this. Just a very simple example in this case, a simple prompt. So, and it has highlighted the three core determinants. Those of you who are researchers in entrepreneurship will be familiar with this theory. Is widely used in terms of entrepreneurial intention studies and so on. So it has identified three determinants, as it calls it: attitude towards behavior, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control. And these elements and all of that stuff. So imagine if somebody used this and copy and paste it and popped it on a research paper. That is an example of unethical use of generative AI, because it circumvents and bypasses the applied intellectual process of engaging with the material, of grappling with it. So what this does is that it's saying in effect that you don't need to read Adzen's 1991 paper or any other paper on the theory of planned behavior. You can just come up here, and if you do read it, if you read the full paper and read it rigorously, you are going to need a couple of hours to do justice to that, at least to get a sense of what the main talking points are. But coming here, you need all of 1 minute to generate these outputs. And what you then have is that short cutting or cutting short or bypassing or that process, that intellectual process that is foundational to the whole business of knowledge production. You need to grapple with what others have done, not on the surface, but in depth, to be able to identify viable gaps in knowledge. And by coming first here to run that, that is not good. That is an example of inappropriate abuse or unethical use of generative AI. So I wanted to flag that. So this is an example of copywriting. This is using ChatGPT to copyright. Imagine that we flip this, and I'm just going to pick a paper of mine, published already, by the way, at random. So imagine that I come here and I write, carry out a critique of this abstract and provide suggestions on where and how to strengthen it. Limit the suggestions to 4 major ones, because I don't want it to do a full page for suggestion. And then I'm now putting my abstract there. This is a published paper already, by the way. So this was published 2 years ago in Technological Forecasting and Social Change, one of the leading journals and innovations studies. So I've popped in here the abstract that we wrote, the author's team wrote by herself, no help from ChatGPT. But I've now brought it here to ChatGPT and say, can you critique this? And give some suggestions on how we can make this better. Now, it is doing exactly that. It is giving some suggestion, critique, suggestion, critique, suggestion, critique, suggestion. This is a very good example of the use of ChatGPT to strengthen the research process, to enhance the research process. So this is an example of using it for feedback. Or I might come back again and say, can you refine this for clarity and scholarly urgency, whatever that means. I'm just thinking now off the cuff. So again, I've popped the same abstract there and ask you to refine it to make it clearer, to make it stronger. It has done that. So this for me is an example of copy editing. You have written your original content and you are asking the interface either in this case to give you specific feedback on what to do with it, or in this case to refine the languaging so that it's clearer. But even then, what you have here is then a suggestion, not something you copy and paste. It's a suggestion then to work with and to make even better. So this use case is the one in which editors then say, just declare it. We're happy with that. If you are using it for copy editing to make your work more readable, to make it clearer, yeah, that is fine, but declare it and it won't be an issue. This second example I use of feedback, you don't even need to declare that, because this is feedback, this is suggestion, this is a critique of what you've done and some suggestions, and it's up to you then to do whatever you want to do with the suggestion. So this is feedback. The point I'm then making there is that ChatGPT is a really broad church where you find both the good, the bad, the ugly, and the very ugly as well. AI generally, and generative AI, in particular. So the idea that this is very bad and you shouldn't touch it is not tenable in my view. The idea that this is the researcher's paradise, everybody must use it, I think is not warranted. In my view, I think is overly optimistic about the limitations of ChatGPT. But let me just share one more example before I leave this particular example, and I will then share with you the custom GPT I've created, maybe for 10 minutes, and then I will invite questions and comments, which I think really is what I'm looking forward to today, to hear your thoughts. So the next example that I wanted to actually share before I forget, the next example, many of you who have published in the Elsevier journals, most of these journals have, section where they ask you to create or to provide highlight abstract. As far as I'm concerned, this is another example of, appropriate use of generative AI, because you are working with an abstract that you have produced by yourself, that is your original content. And what you're just asking, so generate, highlight abstract, is it highlight abstract for this unstructured abstract, which is what the one we normally do is. I think Emerald uses a structured abstract in 4 bullet points, and I can pop that in. Again, the same abstract, and it has come up with that. Can you see? That is the highlight abstract. But what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that it doesn't match what these journals require. You don't need a heading for that. I think it's maximum of 10 words for each of the highlights, or less than maximum of 10 words. This doesn't meet it. So I just use the example to also highlight the fact that getting the best out of generative AI is really about how very creative, how very specific you are with the prompts. So, and that is why there is no shortcut to playing around with it, and that is why people can get different outcomes from the use of this same tool, depending on how very creative and specific you are. So let's come back here. We can edit this, so that's another feature in ChatGPT. You can edit it and get another output. Okay, so we stop there where I say in 4 bullet points, use direct, use plain language and active voice. Each bullet point should not be more than 10 words. You can even go further and say the highlight should not describe methodology, but focus on the key insights of the study. Okay, so let's see whether this is going to be different from what it gave us before. You can see that. So this is the second output. Does it look more like it what you found, with highlight abstract? I think it does. You can try to refine it further, or take it and then work with it. No, don't. I would say never do copy and paste. Still do something with it. But you can see how different it is from the one we got here before. This is no good. This is really not what the journal wants. But by changing the prompt, we have an entirely different output here. And for me, this is one of those cases where, number one, this output is based on the original stuff that you have written as an author. So the abstract is your original work. You are producing a different version of it. And for me, it is not controversial at all. It is fairly straightforward. And rather than spending time trying to think of how can I generate, highlights, I want to spend more time reading, 2 or 3 other articles on the subject and using that to develop, the discussion section of the paper, or doing more with the analysis. This is one of those instances where you can buy time to do the more intellectual aspect of the research process. Let me quickly then jump to ROSA. ROSA is a custom GPT I created last year, and ROSA stands for Review for Originality, Significance, and Rigor. So this custom GPT has been trained then from the back end as a tool for researchers to evaluate, draft working papers, draft of their manuscript that they want to submit for journals. And all it does actually is to provide feedback. So this is a feedback. I can share the link later on, or maybe I should do so now. Actually, I'll do that later. To provide feedback on your draft that you are working with. It doesn't write it for you, but it gives specific feedback. So it is trained with the assessment criteria for REF. Those of you or those people in the call who are UK-based researcher, you know what REF is, Research Excellence Framework, which is used every 7 years to assess output from researchers on the basis of originality, significance, and rigor. And at the end, each paper is then awarded a star, whether it's 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, or 4 star. Something that journals also use. But of course, we know that this is really individual papers. So you could publish a paper in a 3-star journal, but the paper is actually rated 2 star or rated 4 star. So where you publish is not really, an indicator of the quality of your paper. I think this has been a long-standing conversation. And those of us who are familiar with DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment, is a San Francisco framework that most institutions of research institutions, universities across the world, and academic researchers have adopted to ensure that we do not abuse journal metrics. Journal metrics are good; they are valuable. It didn't say we should stop using it, but we shouldn't abuse it. That is, if you publish in a 4-star, we need to see the paper first to actually assess whether that particular paper itself is a 4-star paper or 2-star. So what ROSA does is to help when you feed in your draft, it will give this feedback. And you can see there are conversation starters on the home page, which is you can do each of originality, significance, or rigor. And it will also give you a star rating at the end. At the moment, I think the star rating is better than what it was last year, but it's still a work in progress. At the moment, it is a bit generous. It's giving sometimes, maybe 4 stars for papers that may be 3 stars. So I would say don't worry too much about the star rating you're giving. I then focus more on the feedback, on the feedback that you are getting. That's what I would say. So now I just want to demonstrate it very quickly in the next few minutes. So if I go here, let me just go here, and I want to select from my journal, and let's see. So this is already published. So I'm using one of my published papers, by the way. So, but let's use that. So imagine this is your working paper. This is your draft paper. I can upload it here and then send a message to Rosa. Either I can decide to use this conversation starter, which is to pick each of those criteria: originality, significance, and rigor. And let's do that. Let's use the conversation starter. So this is the originality. So this is what it's going to do if you use the conversation starter. It will ask you to upload the manuscript. So let's do that again, because I was going to do the other one the other way around. Let's come back here, and the paper we're looking for is Picking Up the Pieces. This was published in the Journal of Development Studies in 2022. And so we have uploaded it as is instructed, and it's doing that. It's first beginning to give overview of the manuscript itself, and it has awarded originality score of 65, and then is identifying some of the reasons for that. But also some limitations. So you can see that the limitation that it has identified, talking about how some variables were operationalized, limitations in originality is given that. Is now brought it down to specific, recommendation for improvement here. Okay, and at the end of it is asking whether you want for significance as well. So we can do for significance. So that is for originality, isn't it? Do for significance. Very quick message is going to do that. And it's done that again, following the same approach. And it's giving 70 for significance here and giving reasons for it. And some comment on the limitations as well. Yeah. And then it's then giving, again, recommendations for improvement. And you can ask more. Elaborate on the feedback, on the feedback on contextual scope, for example. So you can have ongoing dialogue as well with any of the recommendation or any particular section of the manuscript that you want it to comment on. So it's done this, is elaborating on that at length, about the approach, the limitation, the lack of comparative analysis, all of that, and what to do. So Rosa can do that. You can use the conversation starter, or you can just upload the document from the beginning and ask it to do a complete evaluation. Run a complete evaluation and feedback, and give feedback on originality, significance, and rigor. So it can do all of that as well. And at the end, is going to then award a star rating. So again, originality here is 65, significance is 70, and it's going to give us rigor is 68, it says, because it's mixed method, because of all of that, strength, limitation, recommendation, and it's giving a 3-star rating. Which actually, I'm using this particular one because this paper was also, it was published in a 3-star journal, but I've made a comment earlier on that is not really the big issue. But this paper was also internally reviewed for ref in my university and was given a 3-star. So I think for me, that's good in terms of the growing accuracy of ROSA to give this kind of feedback. And it's now giving a feedback at the end about what can you do to elevate this to a 4-star level, and highlighted 4 key areas and some suggestions there. But again, like I said, you can have continuing dialogue on any of these suggestions or any part of the manuscript that you want to explore. So yeah, that is a very quick fire introduction to ROSA. But let me pause there for a moment, because I just want to invite comments and questions. But ROSA is an example of a custom GPT that serves, we want feedback from colleagues, isn't it? You'll be happy if, I can send my paper to Martin and say, can you just, give me some feedback on this? I want to submit this to a journal. And Martin, being a generous colleague, will probably, give me a feedback. But I don't imagine that Martin will give me the feedback on the same day, right? I think he has 1,001 other things on his plate. I think if he's very generous, he might say, okay, I'll come back to you next week. So the value of a generative AI tool like this is that you can get instant feedback. You don't have to wait until next week. It doesn't, preclude, seeking feedback from colleagues. Of course, there's always great value in that. But it just gives that extra layer, unique opportunity for instant feedback anytime you want it, however much you want it, on a draft of your manuscript. So yeah, I'll pause there. Are there any comments or questions? Hi, Regina. Yeah, I can see if you upload the same paper and ask the same prompt multiple times, does the result change? The results in terms of the percentage, might possibly change by a few. Maybe it could give you 65% or 67% or 68%. I don't think there's going to be a 10-point change. Yeah, so it's not going to be a big change. It might change by a few points. But I think what is really key is that the feedback, the specific feedback, it might give you additional feedback, but not really changing as such. It might identify new things that maybe it didn't mention the first time round, but it's not going to massively change. You might get new things. But if you want to get more specific, feedback, like I said, you can ask specific questions as well. But it's not going to be a big change in terms of the substance, the key substance of what it is saying. It might add newer and newer things. As you can see in the example I showed, when we did the overall one, it was adding a few other things that wasn't mentioned earlier on. We did individual originality, significance, and rigor. Yeah.
Asking because like the knowledge base of ChatGPT and what it is feeded overall globally changes. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see like even the feedback you get today and then maybe in a year's time and see whether not just the rating would change, but like the...
Yeah, I hear you on that and I agree. I think what I would say is that the feedback is likely to get better. I can already see that. As somebody who created this tool and knew what it was last year, that it's much better than it was because more colleagues have used it as well. So in terms of how accurate it is with the star rating, it's much better now. Yeah.
Okay. Super. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Regina. It's good to see you again. By the way, it's been quite
good to see you too. Really good to see you too.
Oh, might ROSA replace peer review? Yeah, I think that's Joanne. So I think peer review is going to change in the next 5 years, because I don't know about you, Joanne, but every day I decline, 2 or 3, invitations to peer review. You're not paying me. Why should I? Unless we have a relationship, unless I published with you before, or I'm a member of your editorial board, I don't really like random invitation to review these days. If I've reviewed for your journal, and I think I speak for maybe a lot of colleagues here that we are more selective about the review invitation that you accept, because it's just a lot of time. You want to do it well. So I think the peer review, the future of peer review is going to change. But I don't think Rosa will replace peer review. I think what you're going to have is augmentation rather than replacement. I think journals are likely to use generative AI for the initial desk review in the future, before they send it out to human reviewers, and maybe generative AI is likely to become the third reviewer in the future. You have you need minimum of 2. I think if you can get 3 easily and cheaply, why not? But that's me speculating a bit. But I don't think replacement is on. I think what is most certain or most likely to happen is augmentation, that journals will use it to augment the process, which is not without its own risk, because the bias is there. You are trying to minimize it. You have to train it properly to avoid bias, so that it doesn't see a name like Zamadulu, Cecile, Makola, and say, who is this guy? I don't have that name in my database. I reject it. So I think the bias of AI is an ongoing challenge, but I think there is room there for augmentation. Hi, by the way, Zamadolu. I hope I call your name right. I just loved it. That's why I use it as an example.
I did a review for GWO, so I finished doing the review first, and then I put it on AI to see the difference with my own review and what it was going to give me. And truly, what it gave me was it picked out some of the things I didn't pick initially, but it was very superficial. It was picking out things that you wouldn't ordinarily want to talk about in terms of sending it back for review. And when I also sent the review, GWO sent the other review from the other reviewer as well, and both our initial reviews were quite different from what AI gave me. Okay, so in terms of review, so my review, the other reviewers review, because when they make a decision, they send to all the reviewers to say, this, we've made a decision based on this. So I compared my review, the other reviewers one, and the one I got from AI. And even though AI gave me 3-page review, it was very superficial.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the challenges. But I think like I have said earlier on, it is also really about how is this trained. So I mean, I wouldn't use a generic AI tool for that kind of exercise. I would use something like Rosa, something that is trained specifically, maybe for that journal or for that special issue, to sort of augment the process. A generic tool will do no good, in my view. I think you need something that is customized, or rather, or otherwise, you need very specific prompt that will give what you really want. FA has a comment also. FA is an AI researcher herself. Your thoughts on the ethical guidelines and implications of uploading own published paper. Oh yes, I've had this question many times. Uploading your paper on ChatGPT, I don't think it's a problem at all. It's not going to store it, turn it in. It's not going to turn it in and say, "Oh, this is already published on ChatGPT." No, because what it is it works like a memory. It is not a database, a live database of Reginald Frank uploaded this in October 2024, or Mukuba uploaded this in January 2024, and therefore, no. It doesn't work like that. So I don't think there's a concern. I think what it does is that it picks on the process. If more people have used it, it gets better at doing it. But it's not going to store your paper such that it can then be turned in. And I think that's also the question that Oyetoro Ibode is asking about similarity index. No, it's not an issue at all. And in fact, this a kind of the challenge also for us, not only as researchers but also educators, that turnitin is not going to turnitin stuff that is generated by AI. It works only by probability. All the so-called AI detector will tell you, okay, this is 80% likely generated by AI, or it says it is 50%. But what can you can't take that to the academic what do you call that, Martin? You say academic practice board, or where you take students? What's it called?
Your APO, your academic practice office.
I still remember that.
Still here. Still here.
It's not going to turn it in, because you cannot say, oh yeah, we put this in the AI detector and it says this is 80% generated by AI. You're going to be in trouble, because you cannot say probability.
I've got a colleague over in Ireland who published a paper. He's a digital transformation researcher.
Yeah.
He had a paper published 2 years ago, and he did some research actually on running it through those types of tools that exist, and it was amazing how many of his, that the papers were saying 70-80%, and he's absolute. So I actually did it with one of my very old papers, these didn't exist then.
What did you say, 80%?
Yeah, well, I had a 50% sort of that I used. 1994 that paper was published.
Exactly.
So I'm very wary of them, and if colleagues tell me they're using them and are putting students to it, I go, be very careful.
So we have to think differently. You cannot take that report and say, this is the AI detector said it is 80%. In fact, a colleague was just telling me earlier that in Liverpool, John Moores, that a colleague of his tried this on one of the student essays, ran it through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said this is 70% generated by AI. And then the colleague then wrote a piece of work and then put it on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said this is 70% generated by AI. So that is the territory in which we are in. Turnitin cannot turn it in, because of the very nature of it, because there's no journal of business research where you can say, this was published already, or this was already, a student essay from the Montfort University or from University of Northampton. Because we upload our student essays, it is captured on these databases. So that is why we have to be careful, and that is why also we need to rethink the future of assessment. I think I've been shouting this since the days before I left DMU. I'm still shouting it. You'll be pleased to know, Martin and colleagues who are at DMU, that we have to think differently about how we run assessment. How we, and you cannot really ban these tools. We have to move from actually testing knowledge to testing, what can students do? What is the competence? And what can they show? What can they demonstrate? So I know it's not an easy task, and this is not the topic of discussion today, Bridget. But I wanted to just mention that. Your response to your question is that no worries about similarity index. But that is not a let-off. As researchers, we are the custodian of academic integrity. You should not, and if you do it, you're going to be found out sooner or later, because ChatGPT comes up with some crazy stuff that are nevertheless eye-sounding. That if you are not maintaining close an eye, and actively involved. There was a paper published 2 years or last year, or early last year, or late 2022. Which used ChatGPT to generate a figure, and this is a figure of a rat that was used in a study, a mouse, and it was so obviously AI generated. It's incredible that it passed through Dex review, not to talk of peer review, not to talk of getting published. It became an embarrassment for the journal, an embarrassment for the editor, because they then had to, retrieve it from the public. I think, it's also a matter of reputation, it's a matter of integrity. So I would say, regardless of whether turns it in, don't do it. Don't do it, because, it's going to show sooner or later.
Can I ask a question? One of the reasons why we asked you to come speak to us today is this was the follow-up for the Meet the Editors webinar we had last. And there were 5 journal editors. 4 of them categorically said, do not use AI for any aspect of your work whatsoever. Only one was flexible about the use of AI. So what do we say to academics now? If the journals we're aiming to publish for are saying do not use it for any reason whatsoever, and they were sounding like we will know, we have ways of knowing, and we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll death reject, we'll do. So what do we say to academics?
I'm going to say that those editors are those who have not used AI before. You are afraid of what you don't know, unfortunately, and that's true. I mean, that is not to say that these are not highly experienced, academics, editors, and so on. But I think it is based. This fear mongering is coming more often than not from a place of ignorance. For want of a better term, I'm trying to find a better term to use than ignorance, because that is a strong word. But if somebody can help me, I know this is being recorded. I don't mean to, accuse those senior editors of being ignorant. But I think, most have not really tried it on. I mean, I've had conversation, and it's interesting how a lot of people still don't want to go near it. But I think it is also coming, I should say, from a place of genuine concern about the future of knowledge production. So there is a bit of not knowing what this tool does, and a bit of, what is going to be the future of authentic, knowledge production? If everybody can, just go on ChatGPT and generate, content. But as I've just shown in a brief example about theory of planned behavior, I wouldn't put that in a journal, right? Mm-hmm. It's just not good enough to be put in a journal. It's too basic to be put in a journal. So, and I think if you have used, generative AI, as much, you will be more relaxed, about because it just cannot replace the work of a human researcher. And I speak as somebody who is enthused by the enormous capabilities. There is just, that authenticity, that when I'm reading the work, a research paper, you will see it, I think. Okay, let me put a caveat. The conceptual paper will need, I think the future of conceptual paper is going to be more under closer scrutiny than before. I suspect that journals are going to be more stringent with conceptual paper, but I don't think generative AI will replace not in the foreseeable future what human researchers can do. But I think the future of research, as somebody pointed out recently at ISB conference actually, will be owned by consortia of researchers who are pulling large primary data together to do new, brilliant, path-breaking stuff, rather than siloed, small kind. I think data, primary data, is coming back through the back door to the forefront of academic research, because we're going to see more insight coming to life. The kind of work that you are doing with the network, Bridget, expanding this. Imagine we have data from 8-9 countries, and we have thousands of observations. And we're able to, get this in a kind of a semi-longitudinal or quasi-experiment way that is not just cross-sectional. I think, there'll be more of this attraction for this kind of work. By the way, actually, Teams now has a facility where it's numbering it, actually. I've not seen that before. Did you notice now? It's numbered it.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Right, Sunita.
Thank you, Professor. That was really interesting. And yes, I'm afraid to use it, to be honest. I haven't tried it. I've been on the courses. But the perspective I'm coming from is our dissertation students had a talk on AI and referencing of AI. And they were basically told that they can use it, but they have to reference the information.
Yeah.
And a lot of students will use it in bulk, and they said it would follow the similar format where if we use a bulk writing of an academic and we use so much of it, it then discredits our work. So this is, I mean, we're still learning about it from how students are dealing with it, but they've been now told that they have to reference it, and if they don't, and then it gets picked up, they will be in trouble. Now, if they have used it for the bulk of their work, they're not going to pass anyway, because most of it's generated by AI.
Of course.
So,
yes, of course.
do you have any thoughts on that, Professor?
Yeah, I mean, so thanks very much, Sunita. My first question is that how is it going to be picked up? How will you pick it up?
Well, apparently we at the moment don't have the is it the technology? Purely
There's no technology.
Yeah, well, I don't know how they pick it up.
The technology that is out there, technology that is out there will tell you percentage. And like we have said, we can't take that to the board because what is the proof? Which source was quoted? You can't take percentage to the board. I think your wider point again speaks to why we need to rethink the assessment. So we have to always come back to that point, about what are we doing? I mean, essays, I think, is on trial as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
We need assessment that would tell. Yeah, I mean, I'm coming back to that. That's a good point, Regina.
Yeah.
We need assessment that will test what students are doing with knowledge.
Yeah.
Rather than, okay, what do you know? What can you do with it? But I recognize that in practice, that requires, a lot of thinking. But we have technology as our ally as well in that process. If, for example, we ask students to go and pick a particular, organization, get data, from their website, and use that to analyze the strategic management practice of these Deloitte consultancy, for example, to use your name there as a data, they will need to apply their knowledge to that particular organization, right? To tell, what is the strategy, what is the competitive strategy of Deloitte, consulting. So, and that is where, AI cannot really help them, because they are not going to find that data on AI.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they can't use it at all, but they will need to apply themselves to the intellectual process of really having deep understanding of what these concepts are, to then use it to be able to then analyze, what is happening with Deloitte consulting. Just to give a ready example. So, and I think I agree entirely with Regina that, Viva will come back to the fore. And if we are creative about it, it doesn't, in fact, it can be even time saving. A colleague was just telling me today, just today actually, that he ran a module and he used Viva. And guess what? This Viva was done for the whole cohort of about 25 students or 30 students in a 3-hour session.
Yeah.
They were able to present, they answer 3 questions each, and they got a score for the assessment on the same day. Hooray! So they are ready to start going on Turnitin and going on rubric and giving comments, all of that.
Yes.
And then you have the additional satisfaction of knowing that these students actually know what they are talking about, because you have asked them, and each member of the team has to answer a question each. This was the way it was set out. So there are no easy solutions, but I think if we are creative, we can use technology to assist with certain things. We can, use auras. In fact, there's also a new technology, not so new. It's just that sometimes, and paradoxically, our sector sometimes is a bit of a latecomer with some of this technology, which is a curious thing to say, for a sector that is, leading in knowledge production. There is proctoring technology. How many colleagues are aware of the proctoring technology? There is proctoring technology that can be used to actually assess, students, in real time. They can either, do the exam and it's marked, in real time. Mokuba FA doesn't have to worry about, this is the weekend's done for me now with this marking. It can be marked in real time, or they can do the Viva, and the Viva is marked, in real time as well. So that what you then have is just human oversight to sort of moderate rather than do it. So that is why I'm a tech enthusiast. I don't think we should run away from it. I don't think technology is a problem. I think it's the way we use it that is going to be the issue.
I just wanted to agree with Sean, and we've agreed before as well that it's similar to people's fear of using Google like years and years ago, right? It's now another one, and I've taken over a dissertation module as well, and whereas at Liverpool until last summer AI was not allowed, or AI usage by student was not allowed. This year it is actually encouraged, so I'm bringing it into my course. I'm probably the one who uses it at least, but I thought like, okay, even exercises where students use 4 different ones, like from ChatGPT to Perplexity, and then compare and contrast the results with the different tools is really, really powerful, because we want them to be employable, right? And so they need to be able to learn how to use, and also the limitations of it. Now, my own PhD, which is like 20 plus years ago, shame on me, it's like it shows my age. The basic definitions ChatGPT still doesn't get right, and I feel like, yay, it's a good example where the ChatGPT shows still it's got limitation, it's still not fed enough in certain topics, right? Like synergies and bank mergers. But no, just thank you very much for this session. Really good to see everyone and to listen and learn from everyone. So over to you, Bridget.
Thank you. So one last question, that was from Moringa. Please, will there be an alternative to check for AI generated work?
Well, I think because of the way AI works, that is going to be difficult. Because it's not a database. It doesn't keep, this was published this year, this is on this website. No, I think it will be difficult. I think I can't say with absolute certainty, but I think the best we're going to get is detectors that gives you percentage. Which is basically what we have now. There may be better versions of it, but you can't take that to APO. I don't know whether that's what Julius was referring to as well, because he's asking me to come back to something.
Pretty much. I think we've got 1 minute to go. Yes, thank you, Prof. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. And I am sure we're going to be bringing you back again soon. Thank you.
Pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and see you in the next webinar.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Sean. Nice to see you, Regina.
Thanks, Bridget.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. I'll share the link again. It is publicly available. Yes. Rosa is publicly available. Yes, for researchers. Okay, bye, everyone.